Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Nature Plant Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Aizawa was not having the best day. He woke up with a hangover, had to endure Hizashi screaming at a stray insect, dealt with a villain who somehow managed to stuff his nose, and found himself with an unexpectedly light workload. This series of events led him to a park bench, where he sat looking disheveled and out of place. He gulped down his coffee and sighed heavily, feeling as if the day was dragging on endlessly. Pinching the bridge of his nose in an attempt to alleviate the discomfort, he was surprised at how much a small annoyance could affect him. As he sat there, he heard a voice nearby, suggesting that there was enough for everyone. Curious, he opened his eyes and turned his head to locate the speaker. The voice continued, urging someone to be quiet, indicating that they had already had their share. With a soft groan, Aizawa slowly pulled himself off the bench, only to be met with a loud rustling from the bushes beside him. A cat emerged, pushing its head against his leg. Aizawa reached down to pick it up, smiling slightly at the familiar face of the cat. Moments later, a boy with light green hair stumbled out of the bushes, exclaiming that he had found a moat. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the name. The boy seemed unfazed by Aizawa's reaction and pointed out that Aizawa had named the cat Smiley. Aizawa felt a flicker of admiration for the boy's confidence. He asked if the boy had been the one talking to the cat. The boy nodded and explained that it was quiet at night, and Emote usually followed him to ensure he was not alone. Together, they liked to take care of the damaged plants in the area. Aizawa noted that the boy had sounded as if he were speaking to multiple beings and inquired if he was hiding any other cats. The boy laughed softly, his voice gentle, and clarified that sometimes squirrels or badgers would join them for a short while. He then revealed that he often brought snacks for the animals, feeling it would be unfair not to share. Aizawa realized he was smiling as he sat down beside the boy. Feeling unexpectedly refreshed, he asked for the boy's name. The boy introduced himself as Midoriya Izuku, a junior high student, and asked for Aizawa's name in return. After exchanging names, they settled into a comfortable conversation while Emote sprawled between them. Other animals occasionally emerged from the bushes, seeking attention from Midoriya. Aizawa noticed something peculiar about Midoriya's hair, which seemed to move on its own. When he pointed it out, Midoriya gasped and tried to pat his hair down, explaining that it reacted to the slightest breath of wind. Aizawa, amused, mentioned that his own hair moved as well. He activated his quirk, allowing his hair to float through the air, sensing a quirk gene within Midoriya but unable to pinpoint it. Curious, he asked about Midoriya's quirk. Midoriya's face lit up as he explained that he called his quirk Flora, which allowed him to possess characteristics similar to plants. He elaborated that he needed to know both the scientific and common names of the plants to use their traits effectively. Midoriya demonstrated by showing Aizawa small slivers that grew from his skin, identifying them as prickly pear cactus, which he used for defense. He shared that he could photosynthesize, which saved his mother money and was more fulfilling than regular food. However, he also mentioned the drawbacks of his quirk, including the inability to hold his breath and the risk of using too many transformations in one day. Aizawa listened intently, intrigued by Midoriya's insights. When Midoriya mentioned his suspicion about not having found a limit to his quirk, Aizawa felt a sense of connection. Midoriya then turned the question back to Aizawa, asking about his own quirk. Aizawa explained that his quirk allowed him to freeze other quirks as long as he had them in his sight, but the effects vanished when he blinked. He also mentioned the strain it placed on his eyes and how his hair lifted when he used it. Midoriya, with a thoughtful expression, asked if Aizawa had tried using his second eyelid. Aizawa was taken aback, having never heard of such a thing. Midoriya demonstrated his transparent protective covering over his eyes, attributing it to his quirk. He expressed gratitude for Aizawa's presence, stating that he might not have discovered that aspect of his quirk without him. As they sat in silence, Aizawa reflected on how open Midoriya was about his quirk. It was refreshing and made Aizawa feel as though he had nothing to hide. Midoriya then asked why Aizawa was out so late, noting that it wasn't the healthiest choice. Aizawa called him a hypocrite, to which Midoriya explained that he lived just across the street. Aizawa was surprised by the boy's openness, questioning how he could trust a stranger so easily. Midoriya confidently stated that a mote would not spend time with someone who had ill intentions, suggesting that he believed the cat had a quirk of its own. Aizawa, amused, admitted that he worked for the legal system and had just finished a late-night shift. Midoriya smiled knowingly, and Aizawa found himself oddly comforted rather than insulted by the boy's assumption. As their conversation came to a close, Midoriya offered Aizawa a hand to help him up, wishing him an easier shift the next day. He noted that it was almost time for everyone to awaken, as the badgers had returned to their homes and the tree leaves were beginning to bend toward the east. As Midoriya walked across the street and into his building, Aizawa made his way back home, only realizing once he settled onto his couch that his nose had cleared. The following day, Aizawa did not expect to encounter Midoriya again, but fate had other plans for their paths to cross once more. As one could imagine, the situation stemmed from All Might's actions. Aizawa sighed while seated at the police station, filling out paperwork, with Midoriya beside him, waiting for his mother. The incident that brought them there was the sludge villain encounter. According to Midoriya, he had been walking home from school when the sludge villain attacked him. Remarkably, his quirk had a calming effect on the villain, preventing any harm. All Might then burst onto the scene, confronting the villain with his usual flair, which frightened the creature and led to a chaotic confrontation. Aizawa paused his writing, recalling a part of Midoriya's story that he and Tsukachi had promised to keep secret. Midoriya had inadvertently latched onto All Might while unconscious, waking up 30 meters in the air. All Might had landed on a rooftop to drop Midoriya off, and in a moment of self-doubt, Midoriya asked All Might if someone with a plant-based quirk could be a hero. Aizawa nearly broke his pen as he remembered All Might's dismissive response, suggesting that someone with such a quirk could only aspire to be a gardener. With a sigh, Aizawa resumed his writing. After leaving the area, Midoriya encountered the sludge villain again in a plaza. Realizing that All Might was not nearby and that the heroes present would not intervene, Midoriya stepped forward and managed to calm the villain down. The villain, overwhelmed with emotion, revealed that he had been fired by his boss due to his quirk and was struggling to find work, which left him unable to support his mother. In an unexpected turn of compassion, Midoriya initiated a fundraising campaign to help the villain get back on his feet, but it was quickly shut down by the police, who had decided to recruit the sludge villain to assist in capturing other criminals. The villain, feeling betrayed, confronted Midoriya, criticizing him for using his weak quirk and suggesting that luck had saved him from a dire fate. Aizawa set down his pen, contemplating the next part of Midoriya's hidden tale. Later, Midoriya had another encounter with All Might while walking home. All Might praised Midoriya for having a true hero's spirit and offered him his quirk. However, Midoriya declined the offer, expressing that he could not accept a power that did not belong to him, especially after All Might had previously suggested that he lacked the potential to be a hero. He reflected on how the only thing that had changed was All Might's perception of his abilities. Aizawa had to admit that Midoriya made a compelling argument. He worried, however, whether All Might would recognize this truth or continue to pressure Midoriya. Just then, a green-haired woman entered the office, moving with a calm demeanor. She approached Midoriya, inquiring about what had happened. Midoriya explained that he had helped a citizen and had been taken away for it. The woman turned to Aizawa, her expression momentarily darkening as she asked who he was. Midoriya reassured her that Aizawa was a kind man who had helped prove his innocence. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Midoriya, expressing her gratitude to Aizawa for assisting her son. She then asked if Katsuki was also present, and Midoriya confirmed that he was. Concerned about Katsuki's well-being, Mrs. Midoriya insisted they go find him. Midoriya led the way, explaining to Aizawa that Katsuki had an explosive quirk that required him to sweat nitroglycerin, which made him particularly sensitive to heat. Upon entering the room where Bakugo was, the angry boy calmed at the sight of Mrs. Midoriya. The three of them left the building, and Aizawa completed the remaining paperwork. That night, Aizawa found himself once again collapsed on a park bench, with his cat resting on his chest and Midoriya sitting nearby, playing with an opossum. This routine continued for several nights, and Aizawa began to cherish these moments of tranquility with Midoriya, especially during times of stress. As the days passed, Aizawa prepared to teach at UA. Midoriya learned of this and sought help with assignments he found challenging. Aizawa offered to assist him with combat training, which had to be scheduled during the day to accommodate Midoriya's need for energy replenishment. At night, Midoriya would glow, illuminating their training sessions. Their mutual respect grew, and they often engaged in discussions. Aizawa realized that while Midoriya might not see it, he was surrounded by individuals who did not appreciate his potential. Conversely, Midoriya recognized that Aizawa was overworked, a notion Aizawa initially resisted, but he began to understand Midoriya's perspective. One day, after a particularly challenging afternoon, Aizawa posed a question that caught Midoriya off guard. He asked if Midoriya would be his personal student. Mrs. Midoriya felt a mix of hesitation and concern as she observed the man before her. She had been aware that her son had been spending time with a law worker, but discovering that this worker was a hero was a surprise. There he was, kneeling and asking for her permission to train her son, Izuku. She pondered what to say. It was evident that Izuku had grown fond of his late-night walks, even going so far as to buy a second watering can. He had never really connected with the other children. It wasn't bullying that kept him apart, but rather his quiet nature. He preferred the company of blossoming flowers and books, often sitting in silence. Initially, Mrs. Midoriya had worried about Aizawa. Would he treat her son like the others? However, she felt relieved to learn that Aizawa accepted Izuku's quiet demeanor and shared a similar preference for silence. Perhaps Aizawa wouldn't be a bad influence after all. Yet, the fact that Aizawa was a hero weighed heavily on her mind. Heroes often face danger, and she feared for her son's safety. She viewed Izuku's quirk as a blessing, believing it would protect him from harm, hunger, and suffocation. The thought of him entering hero work filled her with dread. He could encounter villains with dangerous abilities. On the other hand, if he became Aizawa's apprentice, he could learn to protect himself and increase his chances of survival. Deep down, Izuku had always hoped to be a hero, and with Aizawa's guidance, those chances might improve. After a moment of contemplation, Mrs. Midoriya decided to give her consent. She stood and leaned toward Aizawa, her expression serious. She made it clear that if anything happened to her son that could not be explained, she would hold him accountable. Izuku was her everything, her only remaining family, and she was entrusting him to Aizawa's care. She hoped he understood the weight of that trust. Aizawa acknowledged her words, understanding the risks involved. He expressed his gratitude, promising to protect Izuku as if he were his own child. Mrs. Midoriya then called for Izuku to join them, and when he entered the room, he wrapped her in a soft hug. As they shared a moment, Izuku mentioned a flower, the filigree hosta, which was also known as the white hosta. It held special significance for Mrs. Midoriya, as it was the first flower Izuku had given her when his father went missing, symbolizing the start of their new life together. Mrs. Midoriya then invited Aizawa to sit down and enjoy a cup of tea, eager to discuss his training plans for Izuku, especially with the UA exam approaching. Aizawa explained that physical training was essential for heroes, but so was academic and mental training. He proposed a schedule of 3 months for each subject over the course of 9 months. However, Mrs. Midoriya found his plan unacceptable. She questioned how a child could retain information after only a month without review. Aizawa took note of her concerns and adjusted the plan to alternate subjects weekly. She insisted that quirk training must also be included, emphasizing that while Izuku's quirk might seem weak, it could be incredibly powerful when used correctly. They worked together to refine the training schedule, ensuring that Izuku would be well prepared. As they discussed the details, Mrs. Midoriya expressed her longing for Aizawa to understand the importance of her son's safety. She wanted to ensure that Izuku was ready for any situation, especially if he found himself in a vulnerable position during training. Izuku agreed with his mother, recognizing her valid points. Aizawa, amused by their dynamic, recorded their conversation, appreciating the lightheartedness of the moment. Just as he finished, his phone rang. It was his partner, who was concerned about his late return. Aizawa explained that he was with the mother of his student, prompting a surprised reaction from his partner. The conversation revealed that Aizawa had indeed taken on a personal student, and his partner expressed excitement about meeting Izuku. After confirming a time for the meeting, Aizawa thanked Mrs. Midoriya for her hospitality before leaving. Once the door closed behind him, she turned to Izuku, expressing her hope that he understood the seriousness of the situation. She made it clear that she would not hesitate to prevent him from seeing Aizawa if he were ever injured. Izuku smiled, reassured by his mother's care, and began preparing dinner, suggesting a teriyaki dish for the evening. Present Mike had admired Midoriya ever since he first heard about the teen. Aizawa, his close friend, seemed to grow more animated at the end of each day, which initially led Present Mike to believe it was due to a coffee shop he frequented. However, Aizawa eventually revealed that he felt a sense of calm whenever he was with his friend. This revelation sparked Present Mike's curiosity, prompting him to ask Aizawa countless questions. He learned that Aizawa's friend was a teenager who was only seen at night and still attended junior high. While he was knowledgeable about his quirk, Present Mike was unaware that it had a calming effect or that the boy possessed second eyelids. He also discovered that animals were drawn to the child, who was notably quiet. Most would assume that this would discourage Present Mike, but it had the opposite effect. He had a fondness for quiet individuals, appreciating the comfort of simply sitting together without the need for conversation or performance. This was one of the reasons he cherished his friendship with Aizawa. Determined to meet this intriguing teen, Present Mike felt a surge of excitement when Aizawa informed him that Midoriya had become his personal student. That night, he could hardly sleep, anticipation bubbling within him. The following day, he followed Aizawa closely from the moment they left the house until they stopped for coffee. Just as he began to think he might never meet the elusive listener, Aizawa unexpectedly changed direction, leading them to a small park. Present Mike leaned over Aizawa's shoulder, eager to see what lay ahead. Aizawa, however, instructed him to be quiet, and he complied, nodding sharply. Suddenly, a rustling sound emerged from the bushes, and Present Mike prepared to shout his famous catchphrase. But before he could, a serene sensation washed over him, causing him to relax and lean against Aizawa. He could feel the tension leave his friend's body. In the bushes, a tall teen with a glowing face sat within their line of sight. He introduced himself as Present Mike, expressing his pleasure at the meeting. The boy's voice was soft and smooth, and Present Mike couldn't help but smile in return, referring to him as the little listener. The boy giggled at the nickname, prompting Present Mike to wonder why it was amusing. He asked what else he was supposed to call him, to which the boy looked at Aizawa, noting that he hadn't mentioned his name, which seemed illogical. Aizawa, surprisingly smiling, apologized and introduced Midoriya Izuku to Present Mike. The sight of Aizawa smiling so openly, especially at a joke, left Present Mike in a state of mild disbelief. He extended his hand to Midoriya, introducing himself as Hisashi Yamada. Midoriya responded with a curious remark about knowing someone named Hisashi, which puzzled Present Mike. He suspected that Midoriya had a good vocabulary and found the use of new to be peculiar, but he decided to set that thought aside for later. Hisashi learned that Midoriya had agreed to be Aizawa's new student, as Aizawa seemed determined to make it happen. Midoriya picked up a baby animal and placed it on his lap, explaining that it was a suro, which typically stayed deep in the forest but would come out at night to graze. He shared that while he had never felt lonely before, it was nice to have someone to share these quiet moments with. He raised the baby animal, inviting Hisashi to hold it, and expressed his appreciation for the beauty of the night. As they continued to talk, Hisashi noticed that animals were drawn to Midoriya, and even the plants seemed to lean toward him. He asked if that was why Midoriya sat in the bushes, to which Midoriya feigned ignorance, claiming he didn't understand what he meant. Hisashi sought Aizawa's support, asking if it was indeed hard to see Midoriya when he sat in the bushes. Aizawa, still lying flat on his back with cats sprawled across him, confirmed that it was likely a side effect of Midoriya's quirk, suggesting that he simply belonged in the bushes. Hisashi acknowledged the point, amused as he petted a deer that had come to investigate him. Midoriya, intrigued, shuffled out of the bushes, his leaf-like hair shimmering in the moonlight. Hisashi pointed out the sight to Aizawa, who had seen Midoriya before but never so clearly at night. Aizawa, with a resigned sigh, remarked that if Midoriya were to get into UA, a curfew would have to be enforced. Hizashi nodded in agreement, joking about the potential trouble Midoriya might face from mischievous teenagers at night. Midoriya laughed softly, appreciating the humor. Present Mike felt a sense of joy, realizing that things would undoubtedly become much more exciting from that moment on. Midoriya had adapted well to the training schedule, a fact Aizawa acknowledged was largely due to his mother's adjustments to the original plan. In truth, Aizawa found Midoriya Izuku intimidating. It was not a fond intimidation. He sensed that if he ever placed her child in serious danger, she would not hesitate to make him face the consequences. Midoriya seemed to share this awareness, often steering clear of potential danger. He had developed an uncanny ability to sense when a fight was imminent, fleeing in the opposite direction or, if time was short, seeking refuge in nearby bushes. Aizawa had been taken aback the first time he witnessed this behavior. During one of Aizawa's patrols, while they were rooftop hopping to help Midoriya strengthen his leg muscles, a loud bang erupted from a nearby alley. Aizawa, as a professional hero, instinctively went to investigate. Midoriya accompanied him for a short distance before abruptly turning and sprinting away. Aizawa watched in confusion as Midoriya fled, only to discover moments later that the alley was filled with gas. He quickly contacted water heroes and another pro hero for assistance. After the villain was apprehended, Aizawa found Midoriya curled up in a tree 2 blocks away. Reflecting on the incident, Aizawa found it amusing to see the usually stoic boy flee. It was a clear sign that trouble was near, but it also provided a moment of levity. Aside from this new instinct, Midoriya had been making significant progress with his quirk. If he activated his abilities before Aizawa used his own quirk, the effects would remain, but activating them afterward proved to be more time-consuming. Despite this, Midoriya's quirk was undeniably effective. It was simply a slower mutation. Encouraged by his mother, he had also begun experimenting with poisonous plants, although he had not used them on anyone and refused to disclose his findings to Aizawa. Aizawa had warned Hizashi, who seemed intent on taking Midoriya under his wing, to refrain from doing so. Midoriya Izuku was fiercely protective of her son, embodying the strength of a mother with everything to lose. Aizawa's observations led him to believe that this sentiment was more profound than he initially realized. There were no photographs of any other individuals in their home, only images of Midoriya and his mother. This lack of representation raised questions for Aizawa, particularly regarding Izuku's sensitivity to the topic of quirklessness. Whenever he mentioned it, he noticed her composure falter, prompting him to wonder if someone she knew was quirkless or if it was a personal issue. As Aizawa grew closer to the family, his confusion deepened. He knew he should maintain a professional distance, but as an underground hero, that was often challenging. One day, while petting a cat, Aizawa noticed Midoriya peering at him from behind some bushes. Midoriya mentioned that Aizawa had grown quiet, prompting Aizawa to glance at Hizashi, who merely shrugged in response. Midoriya speculated that perhaps a new feature of his quirk activated at night, as he had never spent time with anyone during those hours before. Curious, Midoriya decided to test his theory. He asked Hizashi to think of something sad, which caused Hizashi's expression to shift to one Aizawa had only seen after battles where civilians had perished. In that instant, Midoriya's arms transformed into a calming lavender hue, soothing Hizashi's mood. Midoriya concluded that he could absorb body heat as well, attributing this newfound ability to the quirk training Aizawa had provided. Aizawa felt a wave of discomfort at being called sensei, a title he reserved for actual students or younger individuals. Midoriya was one of the few he considered a friend, alongside Hizashi and Nemuri. After a brief moment, Midoriya returned to petting a bird that had landed nearby. Suddenly, Hizashi fell to the ground, startled, and when Aizawa turned to check on Midoriya, he found that the boy had vanished. Hizashi, now alert, rushed into the forest, and Aizawa quickly scanned the area, noticing a group of cameras approaching. He picked up Emote, whose fur was bristling, and followed Hizashi and Midoriya into the dense woods. Aizawa felt a sense of urgency. Just when things had started to settle down, chaos was about to ensue. As he navigated the trees, Aizawa spotted Hizashi stuck in one of them, urging him to hurry up and climb. Aizawa glanced back to ensure they weren't being followed before swiftly ascending the tree, determined to catch up with his husband and student. He understood how Midoriya excelled at climbing, but Hizashi's agility in the trees was a mystery. Perhaps the cockatoos simply enjoyed being up high. Midoriya led them around his apartment building, where they climbed a ladder and along the edge. He fashioned a branch-like key with his pinky and unlocked the window. Once inside, he carefully shut the window, using lichen scraped from his arm to seal it. The three of them turned to face Midoriya Izuku, who had several knives levitating in the air, ready to protect her son. Midoriya calmly asked his mother to lower the knives, and Izuku responded with a smile before directing her gaze towards Hizashi, questioning his identity. Upon learning that he was Shota's husband, she waved her hand, causing the knives to fly away. She expressed her regret for not preparing tea for guests and invited them to sit down. Midoriya led them into the living room while his mother set a pot on the stove. She inquired about Hizashi's tea preference, to which he politely replied that green tea would be fine. Midoriya settled in front of the two husbands and remarked on the unexpected nature of his mother meeting them in such a way. Inko's voice rang out from the kitchen, asking what had brought them to their home. Midoriya quickly explained that the press was involved, noting that both Aizawa and Hizashi were pro-heroes, with Hizashi being more well-known. He mentioned that the press would have a field day if they caught two pro-heroes hiding in the bushes at night. Inko entered the living room, balancing 4 cups of tea and a teapot on a tray. She placed a saucer in front of Aizawa and Hizashi and asked if they had been spotted by the press. Midoriya reassured her that he had sensed their approach and managed to escape before being seen. Inko expressed her relief and Midoriya gently set the tray under the table. Aizawa apologized for intruding, explaining that they had nowhere else to go. Inko smiled and offered them a place to stay for the night, which Yamada graciously accepted. Inko encouraged them to call her by her first name, and Shota curiously asked how she remained so calm about it. Inko explained that their family had never been well received by others due to their adherence to tradition. She added that Izuku had never had true friends, only superficial acquaintances, and considered it a blessing that he had met them. Midoriya confirmed his mother's words, sharing that most children did not appreciate his interests in books or nature. He reflected on his loneliness, noting that he had never truly liked his peers, nor they him. Aizawa found it unusual for a teenager to be so open about their feelings of isolation, but he recognized that Midoriya was not an ordinary teen. Inko finished her tea and announced that dinner was ready, revealing they would be having nabe. She assigned tasks to Hizashi and Shota while directing Izuku to help in the kitchen. The husbands followed Midoriya into the kitchen, where they began their respective duties. Hizashi focused on cutting ingredients, while Aizawa prepared the meat. Midoriya used his quirk to manipulate the stove and retrieve pots from high shelves, while Inko skillfully tossed the cut ingredients into their designated dishes. Inko mentioned that she had received Midoriya's test results, which showed he had scored a 99%. She reminded him to be cautious of careless mistakes. They discussed his English exam, which had been easy, as the curriculum had not advanced much. Inko expressed her frustration that the school should offer more challenging material, while Midoriya acknowledged that many students were only prepared for the current level. Inko continued to guide them in the kitchen, reminding Hizashi to cut off the ends of the vegetables and Aizawa to handle the meat with care. She playfully suggested that Aizawa could learn from a popular manga about house husbands, which made Aizawa silently reflect on his role in their partnership. He felt the pressure of being the more active partner in their marriage, given his demanding schedule. As Midoriya retracted his vines from the stove, he took the knives from Shota and Hizashi with ease, causing them to feel a shiver run down their spines. They observed Midoriya and his mother, realizing for the first time just how powerful they could be. Midoriya skillfully controlled the kitchen, his eyes focused and unblinking, while Inko manipulated boiling water and flames with precision, her quirk evident only by the golden glow in her eye. They felt fortunate to be with Midoriya during their visit. Inko turned to them with a smile, announcing that dinner was ready. The epiphany that Yamada and Shota experienced at the Midoriya residence remained largely unspoken. Nemuri, with a playful scolding tone, remarked on the dangers of single mothers, recalling a story of a mother who had bravely jumped into a bear's enclosure to save her child, resulting in the bear needing emergency care. Yamada shifted in his seat, taking a sip from his drink. He acknowledged Nemuri's point but insisted that the situation was different and encouraged Shota to share more, given his longer acquaintance with the family. Aizawa, resting on Hisashi's lap, chimed in, confirming that the mother was indeed formidable, ready to take drastic measures if necessary. He had sensed her Quirk's presence throughout the building, noting that she could easily impose a lockdown if she wished. Nemuri dismissed the severity of the situation, suggesting it was an overreaction. Aizawa disagreed, and the conversation shifted to the boy, Izuku. Hisashi described him as the most unusual child he had ever met, calm yet possessing a complex mind. Izuku had a knack for hiding in bushes to avoid detection and had an uncanny ability to soothe others. Aizawa added that Izuku instinctively knew when to flee or confront danger, recalling how startled he had been the first time the boy ran away. He mentioned that Izuku was not shy about using unconventional methods to defend himself, having once thrown a brick at an opponent's hand with considerable force and using trash can lids as makeshift shields. Nemuri raised an eyebrow, questioning why Izuku did not simply rely on his quirk. Aizawa speculated that the boy likely wanted to keep his abilities a secret, opting instead for a cloth to incapacitate his foes. This revelation surprised Nemuri, who expressed disbelief at Aizawa's permissiveness regarding Izuku's tactics. Aizawa, however, defended the boy's effectiveness. As the conversation continued, Aizawa mentioned that Izuku was evasive when it came to discussing certain plants, which Nemuri found intriguing. Hisashi remarked on Izuku's intelligence and kindness, noting how animals and plants seemed drawn to him and how people felt comfortable in his presence. Nemuri decided she wanted to meet Izuku, believing he could be a remarkable individual if he was as described. Aizawa felt a chill at the thought of Nemuri's intentions, but she reassured him that it would be a harmless modeling opportunity. Aizawa remained skeptical, insisting that they should seek Inko's permission first. Hisashi, sensing the tension, encouraged Aizawa to let it go, suggesting that Nemuri would eventually learn the truth. Meanwhile, Ms. Midoriya sensed a disturbance in the air, unaware of the events unfolding nearby. As Yamada called out to Izuku while walking down the street, he was met with a warm embrace from the boy. Aizawa and Kayama hurried to catch up. Izuku greeted them, and Aizawa playfully admonished him for using a formal title. Izuku acknowledged Aizawa's preference, then turned to Kayama, who was taken aback by his use of ma'am. She insisted that she was not old enough for such a title, but Izuku, with a thoughtful expression, explained that he had assumed it was a compliment based on her appearance. Kayama's demeanor softened as she realized Izuku's genuine nature. She introduced herself, and he offered his hand for a shake, revealing his first name. Kayama was surprised by his openness, and Izuku explained that he considered her a friend of Shota's, which made her a friend of his as well. She playfully ruffled his hair, enjoying the connection. However, Izuku's response about having no other friends struck Kayama hard. She couldn't comprehend why anyone would dislike him, given his sweet disposition. As he walked toward the school, he noted that people often preferred to care about the crowd rather than the individual, expressing indifference toward their opinions. Kayama watched as Izuku entered the school, unnoticed by his peers. She turned to Shota, sharing her concern that Izuku might only seek help in dire situations. Hisashi laughed, pointing out that Kayama had not commented on Izuku's appearance, which indicated that he had seen through her facade. Kayama, feeling challenged, insisted that she would prove Aizawa wrong about noticing invisible students more than Izuku. Aizawa chuckled at her confidence, but she remained determined. As they continued their banter, Hisashi's attention was drawn to the school, where he noticed something alarming. Aizawa's instincts kicked in as he sensed a familiar chill, prompting him to act quickly. The school was surrounded by villains, and Aizawa urged his friends to hurry, fearing that one of the Midoriyas was in trouble. Hisashi adjusted his speakers, dismissing the idea that Inko could be involved, and they rushed toward the school, ready to confront the impending danger. Aizawa felt a wave of anxiety wash over him as he realized the distance separating them from the woman across the station. He confirmed that Inko, the woman they were looking for, did indeed have green hair. Namuri gestured towards a slender figure approaching the school, asking if that was her. In a sudden rush, Hizashi and Aizawa quickened their pace, urgency driving them forward as they hurried to reach her. Ms. Midoriya had a strong sense that something would go wrong. Years of solitude had honed her instincts, allowing her to anticipate trouble. She knew her son, Izuku, would be caught up in it. Therefore, when she heard the news about villains attacking Aldera Junior High, she was already on her way. Inko was determined not to lose her son again. As she reached the school gate, she called out for Izuku, her voice firm and unwavering. A villain charged at her with a knife, but with a simple wave of her hand, she sent him crashing into a nearby trash can. An officer tried to reassure her that all students were being evacuated to a safe area within the school, insisting that there was no need for her to enter. Inko acknowledged him with a pat on the shoulder, appreciating his concern but resolute in her decision. She could not stand idly by. She had to ensure Izuku's safety. Before she could step inside, Aizawa, Yamada, and Kayama rushed to her side, urging her to stay back. Aizawa, visibly exhausted, insisted that they could handle the situation and would get Izuku out safely. Inko, however, simply laughed politely and lifted them off the ground, placing them behind her. She could not allow them to remain in danger. That would only burden Izuku with guilt. Despite their protests, she sent them flying toward the police station and proceeded into the school. Inside, she quickly assessed the situation, noting the presence of more villains. She chose the left hallway, recalling that the gym was in that direction. Kayama, unfamiliar with Inko, felt a mix of anxiety and disbelief at her calm demeanor. Inko's goal was clear. She intended to clear the way for her son. Upon reaching the gym, Inko and Izuku spotted each other immediately. She clapped her hands to gather the attention of the students, announcing that she was there to escort them to safety. With a confident smile, she pointed at the villains, assuring the students that they would be dealt with shortly. She then moved the bleacher chairs to create a clear exit for the children, urging them to leave quickly. The students wasted no time in fleeing the building, casting curious glances at her as they passed. Once the last child was out, Inko blocked the exits with the broken bleachers and turned her attention to Izuku, noticing his injured arm. He explained that a villain named Muscular had broken it, but he had managed to secure it and was already healing. Inko nodded, deciding that dinner would be takeout that evening, and she encouraged Izuku to invite his friends. She gestured toward the floating heroes, indicating that they knew what to do with the captured villains. Izuku acknowledged her words, ready to take action. As Inko prepared to confront the remaining villains, Kayama, overwhelmed by the situation, expressed her frustration at the lack of explanations. Inko assured her that she would set them down after dealing with the villains outside. Stepping out of the school, Inko immediately launched a pipe at the nearest villain, incapacitating him with a swift motion. She ruthlessly subdued the others, slamming them into the ground until they were unconscious. Finally, she turned her attention to Muscular, the last standing villain. Inko addressed him with a tone reminiscent of a concerned mother, expressing her disapproval of his actions. Muscular, underestimating her strength, laughed at her. Inko, however, was unfazed. She tied up the heroes with ropes and prepared to deal with Muscular, using her powers to lift him into the air and compress him tightly into a ball. His screams echoed as she unleashed her abilities, punishing him for his actions. As Muscular struggled, Inko continued her relentless assault, demonstrating her strength and resolve. She formed a wheel from the pipes and secured him to it, delivering a harsh lesson for his misdeeds. Muscular's attempts to protect himself only resulted in more pain as Inko executed her punishment. Just then, Izuku emerged from the group of students, looking unscathed despite having faced the remaining villains alone. Inko acknowledged her son's presence, ready to wrap up the confrontation. She let Muscular fall into the ground, satisfied with the outcome, and suggested they go out for dinner. With the pro-heroes freed from their restraints, Inko proposed a meal of onagi, eager to celebrate their victory and ensure her son was safe. Yamada observed the interaction between Aizawa and Midoriya, noting that they had unspoken words to share. He placed a pepper shaker in front of Midoriya, prompting him to recount the events in the gym. Midoriya mentioned that he had defeated the villains but was reluctant to divulge the details. He expressed that both Aizawa and Yamada kept secrets from him, and in turn he would keep his own. Aizawa, perplexed, questioned what secrets they could possibly have withheld. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, indicating that he believed Aizawa already knew the answer. Just as Aizawa was about to respond, Yamada gently interrupted, reminding him that they had indeed kept information from Midoriya regarding their lives as heroes. Aizawa conceded, acknowledging Midoriya's right to keep his secrets, but emphasized that their training must continue without distractions. Midoriya smiled, appreciating Aizawa's understanding, and returned the pepper shaker to Yamada. Yamada, eager to continue the conversation, attempted to interject but was quickly silenced by Aizawa. He looked hurt, feeling cut off before he could finish his thought. Yamada then turned to Midoriya, pleading for his support, but Midoriya reminded him that Aizawa was his husband and that they needed to resolve their issues independently. At that moment, Ms. Midoriya returned from the restroom and sat beside her son, separating her food. She expressed her willingness to accept Yamada and Aizawa as father figures but made it clear that her judgment was final. Yamada saluted her in a playful manner, while Aizawa reluctantly agreed to let Midoriya join them for a pro-hero convention, knowing that Yamada would likely interfere. Yamada was taken aback by the unexpected approval, and Aizawa, while eating, poked Kayama, who was curious about why she received an immediate affirmative response. Inko, Midoriya's mother, politely inquired if they would like to attend the convention together. Yamada nearly choked on his soup, frustrated by Kayama's tendency to jump into conversations without hesitation. Aizawa, still chewing, indicated that Midoriya could attend, but he needed to wear a disguise. He offered to take Midoriya to Best Jeanist for a custom outfit, which Ms. Midoriya approved. Yamada, excited, remarked on the story of how the floral hero got his costume, suggesting that Midoriya should adopt the name Floral Hero given his plant quirk. However, when pressed about his hero name, Midoriya admitted he had not considered it, as he had initially planned to become a business leader. Yamada was taken aback, unsure if Midoriya was being truthful. Aizawa encouraged him to come up with a hero name, and while stealing a bite from Yamada's food, he reminded Midoriya that every hero needed a signature element to capture the attention of their fans. Midoriya thought for a moment and finally suggested the name, the Floral Hero, Two-Way. He explained that a flower could yield two results, one beneficial like medicine and the other harmful like poison, making it a simple yet meaningful name. Yamada and Kayama praised the choice, with Kayama emphasizing the potential for memorable catchphrases. Aizawa added that every hero should have something distinctive, whether it be a hairstyle or glasses, to maintain their identity while engaging with fans. As the evening wore on, Ms. Midoriya noted that it was getting late and that Midoriya would see everyone the next day. Amidst the playful bickering over who would pay the bill, the group prepared to leave. Aizawa bid farewell to the Midoriyas, promising to see them the following night. Best Jeanist squinted as he observed the boy that Aizawa and Yamada had brought with them. The boy looked peculiar, and Best Jeanist couldn't help but wonder about him. He asked for the boy's name, and the boy replied that he was Midoriya Izuku. Best Jeanist exchanged a glance with Aizawa, who shrugged, indicating that Midoriya was more of Mick's responsibility than his own. Best Jeanist instructed Midoriya to extend his arms and hold still. To his surprise, the boy did not flinch when Best Jeanist activated his quirk. Best Jeanist quietly joked about Midoriya being a sturdy kid, but his thoughts quickly shifted to how similar the boy's physique was to that of Yamada and Aizawa. If it weren't for the boy's green hair, Best Jeanist might have believed he was witnessing a love child. Shifting his weight, Best Jeanist inquired about the style Midoriya was aiming for. The boy hesitated briefly before settling into a calm demeanor, describing a vision of something smooth and flowy, like a white egret orchid, zinnia, or lisianthus. Best Jeanist raised an eyebrow and noted the flowers down, asking for one more suggestion. Midoriya mentioned a ranunculus. As Best Jeanist processed the information, He noticed Midoriya smiling and turned to see what had caught the boy's attention. In the corner, Aizawa was silently mouthing the words and typing them into his phone. Best Jeanist couldn't resist capturing the moment on his phone, filming Aizawa as he whispered the name of the flower under his breath. He chuckled to himself, thinking about how much Yamada would pay for this later. Midoriya, curious about the video, asked if Best Jeanist intended to sell it to Hisashi. Best Jeanist confirmed his plan, explaining that he wanted to make Hisashi lose some of the money he had won at a recent gambling party. Midoriya suggested a more strategic approach, advising Best Jeanist to involve Nemuri and sell the video to her at a higher price, splitting the profit afterward. As he spoke, he sketched out the plan on a corner of a new page. Best Jeanist was impressed by the boy's ingenuity, questioning how a junior high student could possess such tactical knowledge. Midoriya shrugged, attributing it to his mother's cautious nature. He then requested to be called Izuku, and Best Jeanist introduced himself as Tsunagu. Aizawa, observing the exchange, sighed in exasperation, having witnessed this personality shift multiple times. He redirected the conversation to the costume design. Best Jeanist took the notebook back from Midoriya and began sketching his ideas. He envisioned a costume named Two-Way, featuring a half-and-half pattern. The front would have a smooth, drift-like design with cool colors, while the back would burst with bright, vibrant hues. The flowing pattern was intended to create a refined yet relaxed look, with breathes that flared slightly at the bottom for a dress-like finish. The sleeves would reach halfway down the hands, where brown gloves would be added. Best Jeanist meticulously detailed how the back would resemble flower petals, with fabric sprouting and overlapping in a chaotic yet controlled manner. Aizawa inquired about the face cover, and after some thought, Best Jeanist suggested a bridal veil. This veil would be black, allowing Izuku to see through it while concealing his face from others. Aizawa noted that it was the same veil Izuku's mother had used, and they both admired its beauty. Aizawa expressed a longing to see one displayed in Izuku's room someday, to which Izuku agreed. Best Jeanist estimated that he could complete the costume in about a week or two, fitting it in between his hero work and other responsibilities. Izuku expressed his gratitude, and Best Jeanist assured him that it would be ready soon. However, Aizawa reminded Best Jeanist about the deadline from last summer, prompting a light-hearted exchange about payment. As they wrapped up their conversation, Aizawa stood and patted Best Jeanist on the shoulder, thanking him for his help. He then turned to Izuku, informing him that Kayama was waiting for him at the gym. Izuku moved to join Aizawa, expressing his pleasure in meeting Tsunagu. Upon arriving at the gym, Kayama enthusiastically greeted them, playfully scolding them for being late. Izuku apologized, explaining that Best Jeanist had instructed him to show her a video. As he played the video, Aizawa watched in shock as Kayama lost her grip on the bar and fell. Her laughter echoed through the gym, and Aizawa felt his ears grow warm at the sight. Kayama's laughter was infectious, but Aizawa warned her to stop, threatening to retaliate if she continued. She quickly composed herself, climbing to the highest bar before bursting into laughter once more. Meanwhile, Izuku observed Aizawa's swift movements as he expertly swung up to the bars, humorously demonstrating his point about following through with one's word. Midoriya Izuku was not on Endeavor's list of top heroes. He was a young upstart, taking down villains without seeking recognition or fame. His immense power and youthful demeanor made Endeavor feel like a C-ranked hero in comparison. Endeavor, frustrated, called for his son, Shoto. When Shoto appeared, Endeavor instructed him to prepare for patrol with him the following day, insisting on readiness before he left. Shoto frowned, but Endeavor's tone left no room for argument. Meanwhile, Midoriya was busy subduing a villain with vines while attempting to free Eraserhead from a cage made of thorns. Eraserhead expressed his relief at being saved, though he was aware that Midoriya's actions had not gone as planned. Midoriya explained that he had intended to guide the villain into the cage, but Eraserhead's sudden descent had disrupted his plan. Eraserhead observed Midoriya closely, noting the unusual stammer in his usually composed demeanor. It struck him that Midoriya might be executing a plan that required impeccable acting. Frustrated, Eraserhead remarked on the effort involved in dealing with the situation. Midoriya offered to carry the villain, but Eraserhead declined, only to relent when Midoriya insisted. As they moved, Eraserhead felt an unsettling gaze upon him. Suddenly, a vine ensnared him, prompting him to demand to be released. Midoriya apologized, explaining that they had encountered a problem. He informed Eraserhead of a gas surrounding them, which posed a danger if he were to be freed too soon. Eraserhead, feeling helpless, contacted their ally, 13, for assistance. Midoriya calmly suggested creating gas-resistant masks for Eraserhead in the future, noting that situations like this were unpleasant. The concern in Eraserhead grew as he realized that Midoriya only described situations as unpleasant when they were serious. A voice interrupted their conversation, revealing the villain, Sosaki, who was clearly not in her right mind. Midoriya attempted to reason with her, reminding her of her true identity as a member of the Wild Pussycats. She vehemently denied it, insisting on her alternate name. As the situation unfolded, Midoriya remained focused, even as he threw another unconscious teen into the cage, instructing Eraserhead to keep an eye on them. He expressed concern for the civilians' safety and urged them to leave. Aizawa, still trapped, felt the weight of the situation. Midoriya's ability to create flowers around him when he was lost in thought was a peculiar phenomenon, especially in a tense moment like this. Suddenly, another black-haired teen was thrown into the cage, prompting Aizawa to assess the situation. Midoriya urged him to observe the boy's condition, noting his frailty and exhaustion. Aizawa recognized the signs of abuse and neglect on the boy's arms, realizing the gravity of the situation. Midoriya emphasized the need to protect the boy, indicating that the signs of trauma were too severe for him to approach safely. The urgency of their circumstances weighed heavily on both heroes as they awaited help. Eraserhead was not on the battlefield to confront a great evil. His costume served more as a facade than a functional uniform. In truth, he was hoping for an end to his own struggles. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone, and he answered it, curious about the caller. It was 13, who informed him that there had been a villain attack at a local estate. The situation was dire, as the assailant possessed a pyro quirk, and the flames were spreading rapidly. Meanwhile, Midoriya had taken control of the situation, securely binding the villains with vines and causing their cage to sink into the ground. He tried to appear nonchalant, pulling his sleeves down as he surveyed the area, wondering where the others were. 13's voice came through the phone again, urging Eraserhead to stay put. The urgency in her tone was palpable as she explained that the situation was spiraling out of control. Just as she was about to reveal more, she abruptly stopped, warning Eraserhead not to act recklessly. She assured him that All Might would be on his way soon and instructed him to return to his patrol. Eraserhead exchanged glances with Midoriya, who was eager to know their next move. Eraserhead informed him that they needed to head to the Ingenium household, the residence of the Ida family. Midoriya nodded in agreement and carefully balanced himself on the edge of the roof, ready for their next mission. Together, they prepared to face the challenges ahead. 13 nearly lost her grip on the iron beam when Aizawa suddenly appeared in front of her. He firmly instructed her to stay away, but quickly moved behind her to assist in lowering the beam to the ground. Midoriya, having set down the ball he was carrying, asked Aizawa what he wanted him to do with the captured individuals. Aizawa explained that inside the ball was Sosaki, a teenage villain with a quirk that produced knockout gas, along with a severely injured boy. He requested that 13 take over watching them, assuring her that the vines would remain under Midoriya's control. Midoriya, eager to act, grabbed Aizawa's hand and pulled him toward the ongoing fights, insisting that their conversation could wait. Aizawa sighed in resignation and agreed, allowing Midoriya to rush off, vines sprouting from the weeds along the sidewalk to aid him. Aizawa then noticed Vlad King waving at him from behind a building, his left arm bleeding heavily. Vlad urgently warned Aizawa that they needed to leave, as the villain they were facing was classified as a Level S threat. The name Overhaul sent a chill through Aizawa, recalling a recent meeting at Nisa's agency where they had discussed the raid. There had been no indication of imminent danger, leaving him to wonder what had gone wrong. Panic set in as he realized Midoriya was out there, having disregarded his warnings. Aizawa called out to Midoriya, urging him to return, but the young hero was too far away and focused on a bleeding child hidden behind a group of guards. Midoriya's vines rose, now covered in thorns, as he charged forward, determined to clear a path. He felt confident, believing he could handle the situation. As he fought through the villains, he was suddenly struck by a powerful punch from Muscular, who taunted him about his mother. Midoriya, undeterred, vowed that he would not be as merciful as she would have been. Muscular, reveling in his strength, boasted about his intentions to eliminate both Midoriya and his mother, his quirk enhancing his muscles further. Aizawa arrived just in time to see Midoriya's vines ensnaring Muscular, and he recognized the deadly plants that surrounded the villain's throat. Aizawa shouted for Midoriya to stop, fearing that he would be charged with murder. In a moment of desperation, he invoked the memory of Midoriya's mother, hoping to reach him. Midoriya, momentarily distracted, released his grip on Muscular, allowing the villain to breathe again. He turned his focus back to the girl he was trying to save, urging her to look at him and assuring her that he was there to help. The girl, Eri, weakly opened her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Overhaul, the villain, interjected, claiming that Midoriya was only helping her for his own benefit and that he would hurt her if she did not comply. Midoriya calmly countered Overhaul's claims, emphasizing that he was helping because there were people who genuinely cared about Eri's safety. He painted a picture in her mind of those who wanted to protect her, urging her to express her longing to be saved. Eri hesitated, visibly shaken, but Midoriya pressed on, encouraging her to say the words that would allow him to rescue her. Overhaul, sensing the shift in the situation, attempted to pull Eri away through a portal, but Midoriya's urgent call for her to speak out went unheard as the portal closed, leaving him feeling a profound sense of loss. With the immediate threat gone, Midoriya's expression hardened, and his vines lashed out, restraining the remaining villains. Aizawa, witnessing the aftermath, demanded to know what had just happened. Midoriya, looking away, promised to explain later but fell to the ground, blood pooling around him. Aizawa cursed under his breath, quickly picking up Midoriya and calling for Recovery Girl, urgently requesting her help. When Midoriya finally regained consciousness, he found himself in a hospital bed, with Recovery Girl checking his condition. She noted that he seemed stable but pressed Aizawa for an explanation regarding the extent of Midoriya's injuries. Aizawa stepped closer as Midoriya sat up, ready to share the truth about his quirk and the internal injuries he had sustained. He revealed that his heart and other organs were intertwined with vines, which fed on his blood to grow, a consequence of his unique abilities. Despite possessing the ability to perform photosynthesis, Midoriya Izuku made a conscious choice to consume foods rich in the nutrients necessary for blood production. Using his power to expand vines and plants from his body came with a cost. It caused him to lose blood. This loss prompted the vines to constrict in an effort to minimize their blood usage, which in turn restricted his organs and veins, leading to further blood loss. Aizawa, concerned about an incident at the plaza, pressed Midoriya for answers about why he hadn't intervened to help someone in need. Midoriya explained that he followed a strict rule. He could hear nature speaking to him, and it often repeated one critical message. He could not save a life that was capable of making its own choices. When Aizawa inquired if he had ever attempted to help, Midoriya's expression made it clear that he preferred not to discuss it further. Recovery Girl, observing the exchange, chastised Aizawa for upsetting her patient. She had been monitoring Midoriya's condition after he had worked tirelessly to heal others. Aizawa informed Midoriya that he had been in the medical ward for about 12 hours and had advised his mother that he needed rest. Midoriya frowned, realizing that his mother had only checked in on him a short while ago. He suspected she had ulterior motives for waiting so long after hearing about the battle. Aizawa offered his phone to Midoriya since his own was dead, but Midoriya insisted on going home to speak with his mother in person. As he attempted to leave, Recovery Girl blocked his path with her cane, reminding him that he needed a guardian to sign him out. Midoriya pointed out that Aizawa hadn't signed him in, which made Aizawa flinch at the thought of his mother's reaction. Midoriya, relieved that he was not in his hero costume, gathered his change of clothes, acknowledging that he would have faced the wrath of Best Jeanist otherwise. Recovery Girl was exasperated by his priorities, especially considering he had entered the emergency ward in critical condition. Midoriya expressed his gratitude for her care before departing, leaving Aizawa to lament the impending paperwork. Upon returning home, Midoriya found his mother, Inko, sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. She acknowledged his return, and he explained that his powers had kept him asleep. Inko raised an eyebrow, questioning whether he had been fighting with Aizawa. Midoriya stood still, admitting that he had indeed been involved in a confrontation. Inko, sensing something amiss, declared that they would be moving. Midoriya protested, reminding her that they had only been in their current home for a year. Inko explained that their agreement was contingent upon her feeling secure in their environment, and she sensed a presence that was beyond her ability to confront. This revelation unsettled Midoriya, who inquired about the implications for his internship. Inko assured him that he could continue his training by commuting to the city via train. Before Midoriya could leave, Inko asked him about a boy he had befriended, expressing concern about potential trouble he might bring. Midoriya reassured her that the boy was just that, a boy and not a threat. Inko, trusting her son's judgment, settled back into her chair, closing her eyes as she pondered their next steps. Aizawa Yamada stood in front of a boy with black hair, concern etched on his face. He inquired about the boy's presence in the alley, to which the boy scoffed, revealing the depth of his despair. He admitted that he had been contemplating ending his life, a revelation that struck Aizawa deeply. Noticing the bruises on the boy's body, Aizawa asked if they were inflicted by his family. The boy's response was a quiet admission that his family was not much of a family at all. In an effort to help, Yamada handed the boy a card and asked if he wanted to return home. The boy began to cry, expressing his reluctance to go back. Aizawa offered his hand for comfort as the boy wept, and he learned the boy's name was Shindo-yo. Meanwhile, Aizawa was waiting on a rooftop, tapping his foot impatiently. He questioned Midoriya about his whereabouts, receiving a pensive smile in return. Midoriya explained that he had been helping his mother move boxes as they had recently returned to their main home for the colder season. Aizawa sensed that Midoriya was not being entirely truthful, but he decided not to press the issue, knowing that it was not his place to interfere with Ms. Midoriya's decisions. He informed Midoriya that Best Jeanist was ready to give him his costume, and that Mike and Midnight were waiting as well. As they prepared to leave, Aizawa pulled a mask from his pocket, instructing Midoriya to hide his face before entering the building, as he would be exiting as a public figure. Midoriya complied, smiling at Aizawa's guidance. Aizawa then took off running across the rooftops, with Midoriya closely following behind. Upon arriving, Midoriya examined the costume presented to him. He was surprised to find that it did not match the design they had discussed. Best Jeanist explained that they had run out of black fabric, resulting in a costume that featured a black veil and a white front. Aizawa tilted his head, noting that it resembled a bridal gown. When Midoriya turned the costume around, he discovered that the back was filled with holes, leaving him speechless. Best Jeanist, sensing Midoriya's confusion, hurried to explain that he had left the back part for an assistant to complete while he worked on altering the breathes. The assistant had taken the liberty of deciding that Midoriya could use his flower quirk to grow flowers onto the costume himself. Aizawa struggled to find a polite response, knowing that the idea was poorly conceived. Best Jeanist lamented that if it had been any other designer, it might have seemed like a good idea, but this particular assistant had a talent for cutting corners in costume design. Midoriya, feeling overwhelmed, placed the costume back in the box, stating that he could not wear it. However, Kayama insisted he try it on, playfully throwing the costume at him. Despite Midoriya's protests, Kayama pushed him toward the bathroom, urging him to comply. As Midoriya reluctantly walked away, Tsunaga commented on Kayama's pushy nature, while Hizashi shared a somber acknowledgement of her personality. Aizawa, observing the commotion, rubbed his nose in contemplation, wondering who might be knocking at the door. Hizashi pushed Aizawa aside and swung open the doors, calling out to Shindo, who waved from the doorway. The excitement in the room was palpable as Kayama and Hizashi surrounded Shindo, chattering animatedly about the hero costumes. Midoriya emerged from the bathroom, curious about the commotion. Best Jeanist, stepping forward, inspected Midoriya's costume, noting the well-fitted waistline, the length of the breathes, and the way the veil gracefully covered his face. He requested Midoriya to turn around for a better look. Shindo observed the transformation in Midoriya since their first meeting, noting how he seemed more composed now. Aizawa acknowledged this change, recalling how Midoriya had been panicking during their initial encounter. He described Midoriya as a typically stoic and kind individual, though he had been nervous at that time. Shindo shrugged, suggesting that everyone has their off days, to which Aizawa agreed but still felt something was amiss. Suddenly, a loud pop echoed through the room, capturing everyone's attention. Kayama turned around excitedly, asking what had happened. Midoriya's back was now adorned with a vibrant array of flowers that formed a shield-like shape, cascading down to his knee. Best Jeanist gasped in admiration, realizing that this design far surpassed his original concept, which now seemed dull in comparison. Midoriya joked about the lifelessness of the previous design, prompting Best Jeanist to gather everyone to watch Midoriya walk around the room. As Midoriya walked, petals fell from the flowers, curling into a dark pile upon hitting the ground. The bridal veil's band was hidden in his tousled hair, giving the impression that it floated delicately on his face. Shindo and Kayama both expressed their admiration for the design, with Shindo admitting its beauty. Best Jeanist, however, insisted that it was not merely pretty but truly appealing, emphasizing the importance of individuality in costume design. He recounted how his teacher had often used the term pretty too liberally, diminishing the uniqueness of each design. Aizawa then encouraged Shindo to change into his costume, assuring him that he would soon feel comfortable. Present Mike, meanwhile, beamed at the pro heroes they passed, proudly announcing that he had 2 small heroes with him, which made Midoriya and Shindo feel shy. Midoriya appreciated the veil that concealed his face, knowing Shindo likely felt the same about his mask. With some time to observe, Midoriya admired Shindo's costume, noting its handsome design. The outfit featured a fitted CRP top that revealed just a hint of his abs, complemented by a soft dark cape. Shindo wore well-fitted cargo breathes that appeared silky to the touch, and his mask bore a unique purple symbol he had created, representing Earth God. His shoes were sleek flats, contrasting with Midoriya's bulkier boots. The color scheme of purple, green, and black worked harmoniously together. Midoriya felt a sense of relief for having vetoed Aizawa's orange suggestion, as he found the color unappealing. As they continued, he could hear Shindo's playful remarks through his gas mask, which required considerable concentration to avoid any floral mishaps. Present Mike, ever the enthusiastic leader, proposed they do something fun while Aizawa was off-duty, igniting a spark of excitement among the group. Off-duty was a term that seemed to carry a different meaning for Shindo. He often observed Midoriya Izuku, a remarkably curious individual. Shindo would describe Midoriya as someone who wanted to know everything about everything. During patrols, Midoriya would sometimes stop for an hour just to observe a water tour, lost in thought. When he concentrated deeply, his face would light up with a strange beauty, as if nature itself was blooming around him. Yet, when he emerged from these trances, he often struggled to recall his thoughts, left only with the answers that seemed to come from somewhere deep within. Shindo found Midoriya's evasiveness intriguing. The young hero rarely spoke of his past or his quirk, and he seemed reluctant to share personal details about his life. Shindo knew the school Midoriya attended and had some insight into his thoughts about it, but he could never quite determine whether Midoriya enjoyed it or if he was learning anything substantial. The mystery surrounding him only deepened when Shindo noticed an unusual orange mark that appeared to seep from Midoriya's nose, a detail that no one else seemed to have observed. Aizawa had dismissed it as a figment of Shindo's imagination, but he couldn't shake the image from his mind. The mark stood out starkly against the hues of Midoriya's veins, and the thought of seeing it again filled him with unease. Present Mick's voice broke through Shindo's thoughts, calling for them to join him on a mission. Shindo wiped his eyes, shaking off the lingering worries. Midoriya stood beside Present Mike atop a giant vine, casually picking at a flower that had grown on his hand. With a flick of his wrist, Midoriya sent a vine down to lift Shindo and set him gently beside Mike, ready for their next adventure. In a different realm, a young woman danced joyfully in a field of flowers, laughing as a man named Hisashi playfully splashed water at her. They were carefree and appealing, lost in a hidden world where the worries of their families and followers faded. But in this serene place, they could simply be themselves. As she settled beside Hisashi in the grass, she sighed, wishing they could remain in this paradise forever. Hisashi assured her that they could live in this world alone for eternity, but she wondered if they would ever truly be alone. Hisashi, twirling an acorn he had found, teased her about the possibility of a little one joining them in the future. She laughed, playfully questioning how he could think so far ahead when they weren't even married yet. With a gentle gesture, he offered her the acorn's top, a silent proposal that hung in the air between them. Meanwhile, Midoriya found himself leaning over the toilet, feeling a mix of regret and exhaustion. He was relieved that his mother was not home to witness his distress. He had pushed himself too far, ignoring the limits he knew all too well. As he struggled to catch his breath, he reflected on his reckless decision to help someone who hadn't asked for it. The weight of his powers felt heavy, and he couldn't help but resent the burden they placed on him and his family. Eventually, Midoriya collapsed to the ground, a flower blooming beside him, offering a water-soaked leaf as a gesture of kindness. Shindo stood nearby, raising an eyebrow at Midoriya's state. He teased him about lacking physical strength, to which Midoriya responded with a weak protest. Aizawa, observing from a distance with his arms crossed, reminded them both of the need for serious training. Midoriya retorted, pointing out that Aizawa was there to help them improve. As the banter continued, Shindo grew tired of their back and forth and suggested they go out for food, declaring that Aizawa would treat them. Midoriya, eager for a change of scenery, quickly agreed and lifted himself off the floor with the help of a vine. He grabbed the door handle, asking Aizawa if he was coming along. With a resigned sigh, Aizawa followed, agreeing to their plan. Later, at the dinner table, Ms. Midoriya inquired about her son's training, and Midoriya, gazing at his plate, assured her that it was going well. The conversation flowed naturally, a comforting reminder of home amidst the chaos of their lives. Midoriya sensed the underlying tension in the air during dinner. His mother had asked if anything exciting had happened, and he understood her inquiry was about the dangers of their training under Eraserhead. He reassured her that nothing particularly alarming had occurred, aside from a minor encounter with a villain, which was hardly noteworthy. As they continued their meal in silence, Ms. Midoriya suddenly set down her chopsticks and mentioned that her sister had called. Midoriya continued eating, curious about the conversation. His mother revealed that some troubling events were happening back home and that his aunt and cousin would be visiting. The news unsettled Midoriya, causing his vines to instinctively reach out around his feet. The thought of his relatives stepping into his home had never crossed his mind, especially given his mother's strong feelings about them. He realized she was trying to communicate something important, something she suspected about him that even Aizawa was unaware of. Determined to keep his secret safe, he agreed to clean the spare room but made it clear to his mother that no one could know about his situation. She confirmed that it was crucial for their safety, and the tension lingered throughout the rest of their dinner. The following day, Shindo noticed a distinct change in Midoriya. His training was flawless. He made no mistakes and showed no signs of overreacting. Even Aizawa seemed suspicious. Both watched Midoriya closely, taking mental notes. Shindo recalled a previous incident when Midoriya had appeared to be struggling internally, almost as if he were running out of air. Today reminded him of that moment, and he sensed something was troubling Midoriya. Shindo suggested they visit Aunt Sam's after dinner, excited about trying a new dessert. However, Midoriya declined the invitation, his tone monotonous and lacking genuine enthusiasm. Shindo, oblivious to the subtle signs of distress, joked about Aizawa's cooking, which prompted a defensive reaction from Aizawa. Midoriya remained unfazed, his mind elsewhere as he packed up his training equipment. He mentioned needing to get home for dinner, hinting at something special his mother was preparing, but his friends were too caught up in their banter to notice his unease. Later that night, Aizawa instinctively made his way to Midoriya's usual meeting spot, but the boy was absent. As he approached the apartment buildings, he felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The familiar traces of Mrs. Midoriya's quirk were absent, replaced by an ominous sense of danger. Aizawa looked up to see a strange glow emanating from the Midoriya apartment. He reminded himself that it was not his place to interfere, yet he couldn't shake the worry for Midoriya's safety. Just then, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message, warning him to stay away for Midoriya's sake. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him as he contemplated the implications of the message. Once upon a time, in a world filled with magic and adventure, a young hero found themselves on a quest to save their homeland. The sun shone brightly over the lush landscape, casting a warm glow on the path ahead. The hero, determined and brave, had gathered a group of loyal companions who shared the same goal: to defeat the dark forces threatening their world. As they journeyed through enchanted forests and treacherous mountains, the group encountered various challenges that tested their strength and resolve. Each member brought unique skills to the team, and together they faced formidable foes, solving puzzles and overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. One day, while traversing a narrow mountain pass, they stumbled upon an ancient ruin. The air was thick with mystery, and the companions felt an inexplicable pull toward the crumbling stone structure. Inside, they discovered a hidden chamber filled with ancient artifacts and inscriptions that hinted at a powerful relic capable of turning the tide in their battle against darkness. Realizing the importance of their discovery, the group carefully examined the relic's history. It was said to possess the ability to amplify the wielder's strength and grant them unparalleled wisdom. However, it also came with a warning: the relic could only be used by one who was pure of heart and truly worthy. As they debated their next steps, each member reflected on their own motivations and desires. The hero, feeling the weight of responsibility, knew that the fate of their world rested on their shoulders. They resolved to prove their worthiness and claim the relic, not just for themselves but for the sake of their friends and the future of their homeland. With renewed determination, the group set out to complete a series of trials designed to test their character and resolve. They faced their fears, confronted their pasts, and ultimately emerged stronger and more united than ever. Each trial brought them closer to understanding the true meaning of friendship, sacrifice, and courage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stood before the relic once more. The hero stepped forward, heart racing, and reached out to grasp the ancient artifact. In that moment, a brilliant light enveloped them, and they felt an overwhelming surge of power and clarity. The hero had proven their worth, and with the relic in hand, they were ready to face the darkness that threatened their world. With their spirits high and their bonds stronger than ever, the group set forth to confront the dark forces. They knew that together, they could overcome any challenge and restore peace to their homeland. The adventure was far from over, but with courage and friendship guiding them, they felt ready to face whatever lay ahead.